He's Mike Florio from ProFootballTalk.com. You can also watch him on Pro Football Talk on NBCSN every weekday night at 5:30 Eastern. You want to weigh in on the poll question? Who will be the greatest Colts quarterback of all time?
Burt Jones getting no love?
Yeah, I love Burt and Roger Carr and Lydell Mitchell, but can't put him in there.
Probably Peyton Manning. Until Andrew Luck wins the Super Bowl. I mean, it's too hard to project what's going to happen into the future. Although when we look at the next decade, when Peyton and Eli and Brady and the other guys on the wrong side of 30 are gone, it's probably going to be Andrew Luck's league. And I don't know who's going to be the other quarterback who is linked to him like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady are linked together. It could just be Andrew Luck's league.
Is there any concern from the NFL, whether publicly or privately, at all of these passing numbers that are being put up?
No, because that's what the league wanted. The rules consistently have been changed over the last 4 decades to enhance scoring, to make the game more exciting, to get away from the old 10-7 games of the 70s. And it's working. And fantasy football continues to drive the bus in ways the NFL really doesn't want to acknowledge because it's a bastardization of the game to break it all down into individual players and then clump those points together. But that's one of the reasons all the numbers are so good for the NFL. So the more scoring, the more people are engaged, the more people watch, the more exciting it is. And the only danger is it becomes arena football where every game's 63-60. But we really don't see a lot of high-scoring games for both teams. They're still reasonably scored. There's just a lot of yards and other numbers being put up by quarterbacks.
What's going on with Adrian Peterson?
He's going to be in court today, Dan, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and there could be. There's no definitive answer yet, but there could be a plea agreement presented to the judge at that time. And I'm told that if there is a deal, it will reduce the felony child abuse charge down to a misdemeanor, which obviously entails far lesser potential sanctions from the court. But also, when you put a misdemeanor on Roger Goodell's desk instead of a felony, that necessarily is going to result in a different level of treatment by the league. And when the guy's already missed 8 games, now it's with pay, but he's missed 8 games, creates a predicament for the NFL to figure out what you do beyond the 8 games he's already missed.
Yeah, I get the feeling if he pleads this down to a misdemeanor, it'd be hard for the NFL to keep him out.
Yeah, I don't know how you can justify it. And the sense all along, Dan, is that they're making it up as they go along. There's no real pro-action here. It's all reaction to public opinion, reaction to polling data, reaction to just how people are going to react. And at some point they have to say, well, what's the right thing to do for the player? What's the right thing to do for the team that has been paying him every week that he's been unavailable to play? I mean, we're not going to let him play until the charges are resolved. Okay, the charges are resolved. He has a misdemeanor. Now, I mean, what do we do? Do we suspend him for the rest of the season over this? It's going to be a tough call for the NFL. I'm sure they'd prefer that it all be pushed to the offseason where they have time to really think it through, and the appeal process, if there is one, can work itself out. The Vikings are off this Sunday, but they're back in action on the 16th against the Bears, and it's hard to argue against Peterson being allowed to return. You just take some of the money away from him that he's already earned while he was suspended with pay, and you let him come back and play, unless you would have suspended him more than 8 games for this. And if it's a misdemeanor, I don't know how you do that.
Do the Vikings want him back?
I think the Vikings will say all the right things. I don't know deep down what they want, but I think they'll insist he's a Viking. And I think for the rest of the year, I mean, the team's surprisingly competitive right now, 4-5. No one expected them to be 4-5. You throw Adrian Peterson into that. You know, it's funny. DeMarco Murray was complaining about having to run with 9 guys in the box. Well, that's been Adrian Peterson's career, right? So you put him out there with a quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater who's actually shown he can move the ball through the air. Yeah. All of a sudden, that's a team that could get into this thing down the stretch. So I think the Vikings, at least for the rest of the year, would want him. After the season, I think that's when the Vikings and Peterson would have to assess what they want to do.
Help me explain, or at least understand, this Tony Romo situation, that he's got a couple of small fractures in his back, but made the trip to London, and it sounds like he's going to be playing that game against the Jaguars.
I don't think he's going to play against the Jaguars.
Okay.
Now, I haven't been told that. I just don't think he's going to. And, what happened last week, Dan, we got lied to. Not that that's new in the NFL. I mean, there's so much untruth that gets thrown around. But when you have Dr. Jones telling everybody that there's nothing medically wrong, there's nothing structurally wrong, it's just a matter of pain tolerance. And then 20 different people report he's got broken bones in his back. Well, okay, we're being lied to because they wanted to play the Jedi mind trick on the Cardinals, and it didn't work. The Cardinals, if they prepared for Tony Romo and Brandon Weeden, well, they were still able to shut down Brandon Weeden. And I think they'd like to play that game with the Jaguars as well. I'm not going to be surprised if Romo doesn't play.
But do you think that they knew he had fractures in his back when he was in that locker room, when he went back out to play in the previous game?
Well, they took an X-ray, right? And what does look? I have the same medical qualifications as Jerry Jones, so I guess I can speculate on this. I assume an X-ray shows bones, and I assume an X-ray shows if bones are broken. Now, I don't know whether they were just looking at the vertebrae and not those little, the bones that jut out from the vertebrae, this transverse process. But the X-ray would show that. So who knows what was going on? But the bottom line is the guy who signs everyone's check arrived via zip line from his luxury suite and started to supervise the process. And that's where the disconnect is. When it comes to concussions, right, everything's independent now. The player's protected from himself. The league keeps the teams out of this. It's separate doctors who make the call. But for every other injury, you can still have the old mindset of, hey, if you want to continue to provide medical services to the Cowboys, you tell me what I want to hear. And I'm sure Jerry Jones has a way of getting that message across to everybody who works for him.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, see you, buddy.
Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk on NBCSN every weekday night at 5:30 Eastern.